I'm going to talk a little bit about management. Cover crops are part of a system. They're not just an add-on. In other words, you can't just look at it and say, I'm just going to add cover crops on and not change anything else I do. Probably the biggest thing that has to change is, well, you really can't do fall tillage if you're going to have a cover crop. No-till makes it a lot easier. Yes, there are people that probably have put in cover crops and done fall tillage, but you can imagine what that takes to do that. Another thing is you might have to consider not using full season maturity, which a lot of farmers do to stagger out their harvest, but that's something to consider also. Obviously, there's big issues with logistics. If you're going to try to plant cover crops after harvest, to continue harvesting and get cover crops seeded at the same time. The farmers that I've dealt with that do this usually have either help. In the one case, the guy's wife goes out and plants the cover crop while he's harvesting, or he has students or local neighbors' kids helping him do that. And why is planting data in the fall important? This is with cereal rye. These were 3 different years, different planting dates here in central Iowa. Essentially, if we got it planted before November 1st with cereal rye, which is very winter hardy, we would get, that's basically about 500 pounds per acre, which is enough to help you with erosion control. It's probably not what we'd want in terms of nitrogen management. In other words, we're not going to get a 53% reduction in nitrogen with 500 pounds of rye growth. We probably need to be up in the 1,000 to 1.5, somewhere in that range. So essentially for central Iowa here, we'd like to be here somewhere in the middle of October of getting that seeded for it to be as effective as it could be. It's still doing some good at those lower levels, but not as much good as it could. And we have planted here in central Iowa as late as December 15th. Doesn't look pretty, and a lot of the seed comes up in the spring rather than the fall, but you will get a stand. Or you can get a stand. I wouldn't recommend it, but...
How late did you say again?
We went as late as December 15th. I would not recommend that. I would recommend before November 1st for a winter hard cereal. These are just some shots from Purdue of different cover crop seeding methods. Just the regular old drill after harvest, which is the most effective. Broadcast with shallow incorporation. Yeah. This is another variation on that in a no-till system. And that's what kind of stand they got with that. Aerial seeding, which is becoming popular. And a lot of, it's especially becoming popular with the airplane operators. They will, I've heard costs from $10 to $15 an acre, depending.
We're up to 20.
They can be up to 20.
Depends on how far you are from the landing strip.
That's right, exactly right. And what you're putting on too, how many times they have to load, and how many acres you have.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, all of the above. But it does fit into their program because they're done with insecticide spraying in about mid-August most of the time. So, and that's about the time they'd start to look to start seeding cover crops. With soybeans, you want to hit it right at about leaf yellow. With corn, you want to hit it just before black layer or when you start to see some lower corn leaves. For instance, that picture, that corn looks like it's a little bit more mature than we would like it to be, or it's getting to be late, but if that, it's better that than earlier, because you need the light penetration into the canopy. In the early days when we were doing it, we were trying seeding at some early dates, and we had one instance where we had oats that were 2 feet tall when we went out with the combine, and it actually wasn't a problem. I'm not sure the ag engineering reasons why it wasn't a problem, but actually the sickle bar kind of pushed it over, and what green material we got in with the seed was just dried up and shriveled up, and you couldn't even see it in there. So I'm not saying it would never be a problem, but it usually doesn't grow that much by the time you harvest. I guess this is kind of an interesting thing. There are getting to be people that are either making their own or adapting sprayers to seeding cover crops. And we also, the people in Iowa working on cover crops have met with machinery manufacturers that are looking at doing this. Of course, driving through the field is going to cause more main crop damage than aerial seeding it, but you don't get as much seed stuck up in the canopy. Managing cover crops in the spring. Only winter hardy cover crops need to be killed, of course, so if you have radishes or oats or anything that winter kills, you don't have to worry about them. In a year like this, I would be watching our soil moisture. If we don't get rains, I'd be killing the cover crop as soon as I could. We're saying kill a grass cover crop, and by that I mean ryegrass, cereal rye, winter wheat, any grass before a corn crop 14 days prior to planting or before the cover crop is 6 to 8 inches tall. Before soybeans with grass cover crops, the biggest concern is dry conditions. Otherwise, they can be sprayed up to 3 days before planting. And be sure to comply with crop insurance termination dates. And crop insurance is a big mess as far as cover crops. They do not know how to handle.
Is you really saying spray it 14 days?
I'm saying spray it 14 days before. Basically, when we've sprayed it, it stops using water basically within a day to a day and a half. So that's part of it. It's starting to die. Oftentimes in early spring, it'll take 7 to 10 days at least, sometimes longer. When we've tilled it in, we've also sprayed it, but you wouldn't have to, but you're probably going to take at least 2 tillage passes. But I would say yes, I think it still takes the 14 days. We can discuss that, in more detail, but the 14 days came out of a research quite a bit ago, but we really don't know what the cause is in terms of the effect on the following corn crop. Talk about different methods of terminating cover crops. The last one, rolling or mowing, can work for some cover crop species in organic systems. You're waiting for it to head out, and then if you roll it, that can kill it with the cereal rye or any of the winter wheats. And then I just wanted to, this is probably a year similar to what we have now, in which we're not seeing any growth before April 1st. We had some reports from the field yesterday or last Friday that we're just starting to see growth. But once it starts growing, it takes off pretty fast in the spring. And this is cereal rye. And since Jamie says I've got a minute left, I'm going to end it there.